as we were implementing the deal to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, to resolve other longstanding concerns that we had with Iran. And that included securing the release of 5 American citizens who'd been unjustly detained in Iran, and closing out a long-standing financial dispute.
Presidential Press Secretary Josh Earnest, and I don't think there's ever been someone more appropriately named. Think of that name, Josh Earnest, joking about sincerity. So that's the explanation today about the ransom. The ransom the Obama administration played out, $400 million given to Iran. You heard Josh Earnest say it was part of a long-standing financial dispute, even though those American hostages mentioned, or prisoners, were released about the same time that money was given over to the Iranians. Let's discuss it now with an award-winning panel. I'll grant them awards of being just all-around great guys. First, Skyping in from Holland, Michigan, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra, my old pal from the Hill. Pete's currently a Shillman Senior Fellow for the Investigative Project on Terrorism. He's also the author of the book, Architects of Disaster, The Destruction of Libya. And joining us from Newsmax, Washington, retired Army Colonel Patrick Murray. He served in Iraq, Russia, and at the United Nations. Patrick is the author of the book, Government is the Problem. Donald Trump, gentlemen, weighed in on this via Twitter. Let's take a look at what he had to say. He tweeted, "Our incompetent Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, was the one who started talks to give $400 million in cash to Iran. Scandal." And we see the tweet right there. Now, Petey, typically when lawyers get this going on, it wasn't exactly $400 million. All sorts of different currency, all different denominations, but the bottom line is it was a payoff, it was a ransom, correct?
That's what I would look at. Josh Earnest is talking about, well, we closed out this deal, that deal, and that deal. You'd think they would have had a major press conference and said, we have started a new road with Iran. We have an Iran nuclear agreement. We've closed out this financial dispute, and we've obtained the release of our hostages. And they talked a lot about the release of the hostages. They talked a lot about the Iranian deal, which I still think is a bad deal. But they forgot to ever mention that the day this all happened is they put 400 million in euros and Swiss francs on an unidentified plane, unmarked plane, in Switzerland, and they had pallets of money and they flew it to Iran, and they just happened to forget to tell the American people in Congress this was a quid pro quo, regardless of what Josh Earnest says.
Well, Colonel, I want you to hear Donald Trump this afternoon at his rally in Daytona Beach doubling down against this ransom. Let's listen to what Mr. Trump had to say, and then I'll get your reaction afterwards.
In order to embarrass us further, Iran sent us the tapes, right? It's a military tape. It's a tape that was a perfect angle, nice and steady, nobody getting nervous because they're going to be shot because they're shooting a picture of money pouring off a plane. And then you say, where does that money go? Who gets that money? I doubt it's the people of Iran. I doubt it. But you say, who gets the money? Then you also say, who's authorized to give cash?
And so there is Trump laying it out as a guy who has a nose for finance and money. Your reaction, Colonel?
Well, if anybody knows publicity, it's Donald Trump. And the Iranians aren't too bad either. And regardless of what Josh Earnest and Barack Obama and this administration say, listen to what the Iranians have been saying. And their Iranian Revolutionary Guard generals have been saying this was explicitly an exchange. We got all of this money from the Americans in order to release these hostages. That's exactly what happened. And in terms of your lead-in that you mentioned a while ago, that it's not exactly $400 million, that's right. Did you know our Department of Justice pushed back on this and said you can't send American dollars to Iran. It's illegal. So what our government, the Obama administration did was they laundered $400 million of U.S. taxpayer dollars through Europe through Switzerland, and they gave them euros and Swiss francs. And I never would have thought that I would have seen the day that a U.S. administration is actually using taxpayer dollars to fund the world's biggest state sponsor of terror.
And Pete, just quickly for your reaction on this, laundering funds to pay a ransom. Can you imagine how the leftist media would cover this had a Republican president done it?
I can imagine, and it wouldn't be anything of what we're seeing today. It's almost total silence. You know, it was not only laundering money, but remember, JD, American citizens were trying to lay claim to this money. They were suing Iran for what Iran had done to them. That money is now gone. It's funding terrorism to do more damage to Israel, U.S., and European interests.
Let us go to the phones, gentlemen, at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. We go out to El Monte, California, where Catherine is on the line. Hi, Catherine.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. We thank you for calling in. What's on your mind?
Well, we really believe that this is very corrupt. We get so many lies from Washington now. This money that's been given to Iran is totally corrupt. We don't believe that it was given for the people that are brought out of Iran. We believe that it's a corrupt manipulation of the White House again. We just can't believe that this is really, truly something done for the rights of the poor people that are brought back.
Yeah,
it's just not.
And Catherine, we appreciate your passion and your insight. And Colonel, the other thing it does, when you start paying ransom, basically you've put a price on every American's head who's traveling abroad.
Well, Catherine makes a good point, and that's exactly what's happened. We did get our hostages back, 5 of them, and thank God for that. But guess what's just happened? I mean, we've given Iran now, they've broken the code. They've just rolled up 2 more Americans, as well as a couple of Europeans, because they realize that this administration, as long as it's in power, they've signaled that they're willing to pay them off in return for hostages. So that's what's happening. That puts a target on the back of every American who's abroad. And unfortunately, it hurts our national security as well. Why do they want cold hard cash, JD? They're not doing anything but sending it to Hezbollah or Hamas, or they're purchasing weapons, and that's what they're doing to facilitate their worldwide terrorism goals.
Gentlemen, there is another disturbing development we need to discuss. It occurred in Washington. The Department of Justice announcing that it has arrested a Washington, D.C. transit officer for alleged ties to ISIS. 36-year-old Nicholas Young arrested by the FBI earlier today. Young has been working for the D.C. Metro Police since 2003, despite being monitored by the FBI since 2010. And so the FBI monitored him, but he continued to work. Isn't there risk in trying to set up these Justice Department stings, Pete? Remember that sorry and sad episode with the Fast and Furious gun running down in Arizona? Isn't this playing with fire to do these kind of deals like this?
Well, I think it is playing with fire, but I'll give them a little bit of a break here, JD. They knew this guy. They were in constant contact with him through someone who was, pretending to be an ally of his, who was going to go over and fight with ISIS in Syria. So they were monitoring this guy very closely. And I think they were trying to figure out, are there more people? Is this guy going to radicalize? Is there a bigger network? And if there's a bigger network, we want to execute the stings. So I'll cut them a little bit of a slack.
Sure, understood. It's just the tough thing about these kind of inside operations. We should note, Colonel, that this is the first time the FBI has charged a law enforcement officer in our nation with attempting to provide material support to the Islamic State. What does this say about the reach of ISIS to you, sir? We only have about a minute left.
Yeah, well, look, we're taking back some terrain from ISIS in Iraq, and that's a good thing. But concurrently, ISIS has expanded in Libya. We're now having to start airbombing airstrikes in Libya. Think about that. ISIS is in Libya because of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And they did their Julius Caesar, we came, we saw, he died, talking about Gaddafi. And now ISIS is running herd over there, and so we're having to do strikes there. And they're all throughout Europe, and they're here in the United States. As you just pointed out, this police officer with the D.C. Metro, ISIS is prevalent in a lot of places. They came up on Hillary and Barack's watch, and I hope that Donald Trump will continue to point that out for these last 97 days before the election.
Very good. Colonel Murray tonight from Washington, D.C. and Newsmax, Washington. Pete Hoekstra, my old friend from Capitol Hill, thanks for your insights and analysis as you Skype in tonight from Michigan. Next, we head to Wisconsin, the first district where challenger Paul Nehlen will join us. He's in a tough race with Speaker Paul Ryan. We'll talk to Mr. Nehlen next.